Ladies and gents, welcome to the video. I'm GetGoodGuy, and today, Battlefield 5, I'm talking about the always much discussed in this game, Medic class. I'm going to go through a lot of what I can think about for Medic right now in terms of its viability, balancing, and comparing it with its previous forms. And hopefully, I'll pull in some stuff that isn't immediately apparent for you when you think of this subject. And for the footage today, I've used both fast-firing and slow-firing SMGs, so there can't be any misconceptions about me thinking Medic is good because I only use the good or top meta guns, or bad because I only use the low meta or bad guns, alright? So previously, the Medic class was dominant in the 5.2 and 5.2.2 updates. Then there was another update, which was update 6.2, which changed the weapon balance in the game again. Now some, but not all at all, but some, that's a weird sentence, some people are saying Medic is bad now. And there's some people saying SMGs don't serve enough of a purpose, don't have enough of an advantage. And I will say that Medic class usage does seem to be down quite a lot in the game at the minute, compared with before when it was kind of rampant. And I myself did previously report on how some aspects of using Medic would be hit by the changes. But I must still be clear that there are some people out there still maintaining that the Medic class is overpowered. So let's break all of that down. So everything you're going to see is from Team Deathmatch, but that isn't all I play. I'm talking about this for the entire game. It's just that mode is a faster way for me to get footage. But also I don't want that to be used as a counterpoint to what we're presenting today. The Team Deathmatch maps in Battlefield 5 aren't really particularly close quarters a lot of the time. They're pretty wide open, so it is kind of still representative of the wider game to a certain extent. And so one of the key changes from the latest update, not just for SMGs but for pretty much all guns, is increased recoil, meaning you can't laser beam people with SMGs from stupid ranges anymore, at least not easily, which takes away an element of the unfair advantage they did used to have, because they didn't really have the necessary limiting factors present. They're supposed to be used for closer range, but with a lack of recoil, you could use them pretty much anywhere you wanted, which created a large imbalance. That's now gone to a certain extent, so of course, the Medic class isn't going to be as dominant anymore, but they are still the dominant class for close quarters play a lot of the time, in a lot of ways. Not just because they're designed for it, but because there's not too much competition in place now. There's things like the M1907SF, the BAR, shotguns, SMGs are just really good at close range, so if that's where you're specifically going to play, you're going to be fine. They still do what they're supposed to do in that intended range, at least the ones that were designed purely for close quarters, not necessarily the ones designed for longer ranges. But let's continue from a wider aspect, heals versus attrition. Medics can constantly heal, before, during, and after gunfights, so it is still the class with the most survivability and thus arguably is the most forgiving class, especially if you want to be aggressive, but also just in general, even if you want to keep your distance. Knowing you can just take a few shots and run away and heal, it's a big deal. I'm rhyming. But we can add to that ammo attrition now in this build of the game seems kind of minimal, so the Medic class has the easiest overall when it comes to attrition, playing solo without friends and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to rely on other people anywhere near as much as you do with the other classes. Let's be real, if you got low health, there's not much you can do. Medic doesn't have that. So even if some SMGs aren't as good now, it's still a really strong class. Whilst everybody else is going around, getting hit a few times, having low health, and not really being able to challenge or contribute if they can't find a medic to heal up from, or a medical station. And honestly, there's a lot of areas on the maps where it's just not viable to go running around looking for a medical station, so you're probably gonna die. But we can bring it back round to be more specific again. A large issue with Medic being overpowered before was seen as the Type 2A being so powerful. Now, as I've said many times, I didn't think that gun was as overpowered as some people thought, but I did think it was still too strong. Well, now it's not quite as good. There's been recoil nerfs to that gun, as well as just the overall increase in recoil in the game, and so that brings down the Medic a little bit, because you haven't got this swarm of people running around with the Type 2A, constantly healing, mowing people down, spraying and praying and all that business. But my Medic brethren, don't panic. It's not as if the class is ruined because that's gone. In fact, we needed that to be toned down a bit. There are still some excellent options such as the Thompson, the Suomi, the Type 100, the EMP if you want to hip fire, and some other great options, the ZK383, either with or without light bolt. So if you want to, you can go for close quarters with the Type 2A, or the Thompson, or the Suomi. You can go for range with the ZK383 and the bipod. You can go for stealth with the silencer on the grease gun. You have options and can still be be very, very powerful and useful. And I think you can start to see which way I'm leaning on this argument. This is still the class that has revives, which are obviously incredibly powerful, whether you're in a kill-based mode or an objective-based mode. This class can also have loads of smoke if you want, which again is really powerful, and a lot of people aren't really aware of this. Smoke can be used to cover those revives, to hide from flares, to cut off angles, to have safe passages through areas, to have escape routes. The medic class has the most smoke of any class in the game, which again adds to that survivability. This is because you can have smoke nades and the smoke grenade launcher. And so with some pros and cons laid out, let me say here that the medic class is certainly not as good nor as prevalent as before. A decent measure of this is actually in Team Deathmatch, which was not too long back pretty much overrun with SMG users constantly healing because the name of the game is to stay alive and get kills. Well, now it's not really the case. There can still be quite a lot of them sometimes, but it's not as if I'm seeing a constant wave of them, whereas before I absolutely 100% was. Then in other modes, I'm noticing that when I'm downed or watching other people's footage, there's nowhere near as many icons popping up a lot of the time saying there are medics nearby. And let's be real, a lot of the time you didn't get revived anyway, but at least it's something we can observe. And that's good because we don't want a dominant or crutch class. We want there to be variety. We want different ranges to be utilized. We want our team composition to be well-rounded. But there are objective downsides to this. Another part of why the medic class isn't quite as good now, but still good in my opinion, is that the slower firing SMGs got kinda gimped at their optimal range. I'm not gonna go fully in depth with this again, as I've covered this before, but basically where the slower firing SMGs are supposed to be good, from say 20 to 30 meters, they now require an extra bullet to kill, whereas they didn't in the 5.0 build of the game, which was the TTK that most people were happy with. And that's something we can see in quite a lot of the slower firing guns in the game. They are not as powerful in their optimal range, but the closer quarters options, the ones with faster rates of fire when it comes to automatic weapons, didn't get nerfed to that extent. And this is why you're not really seeing that many slower firing automatic weapons now. Instead, we got a lot of fast firing ones and then semi-auto rifles and self-loading rifles. A case in point is that a lot of the LMGs in the support class just don't really measure up that well now, and thus their usage seems to be going down. The grease gun is still being used by medics sometimes, but people really should have taken note of that before in the 5.2.2 update, when it was a great counter to the Type 2A, because you could kinda use extreme range in your favor because it's a slower firing gun, has minimal recoil, and was in a build of the game where recoil was really low anyway. So now, while the silencer is nice and I still like the gun and it can still be used well, and some people will say it's really good still, its damage output statistically isn't particularly great. But with medics in general, with SMGs, you can't just run around carefree now with a mid-range SMG option, or even fast-firing ones, and just mow people down from any range, which is good. I support that. And it's not as if you're cut off from mid to long range now, by the way, using medic, because there are still bolt-action carbines, something that a lot of people don't give a fair shot. I'm not showcasing them in the footage today because this is just a small aspect of the discussion, because most people use medic for SMGs, but still, go and give them a try if you haven't. And so with all of that laid out, I don't think the medic class is as balanced as I would like it to be when it comes to all of the weapons, but I'm satisfied with the outcome so far, and arguably it's still the strongest class if you want to be aggressive, if you want to run around, if you want to have survivability, and that in itself is another argument why it might be the best class in the game still. And remember that this was a weapon rebalancing across the board. That does alter things. You can't expect things to just stay the same. And remember how awful medic was when the game first released? At least this is far superior to that. And while I and many would have just preferred to remain in the 5.0 build, the old times kill that everyone was pretty happy with, this is okay. What we have now is decent enough, even if it's not perfectly balanced and has some glaring errors. I personally do not want to see another massive shift, just tweaks to improve. So overall, the truth of the matter is, at least in my opinion, that it's a balancing issue for the slower firing SMGs and a lot of the slower firing weapons in general. Some SMGs aren't nearly as viable as others, and semi-auto rifles are the kings of the game again when it comes to being versatile. But medic itself is in a good spot, not a balanced spot, but a good spot, and I still think is arguably the most powerful class in the game. And so that is my coverage of if the medic class was killed by the recent update. I don't think it was at all, but I want to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments below. And I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leaving a like is massive for me. It helps the channel to grow. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and turning on notifications to stay up to date with the massive amount of content I've been putting out and will continue to put out. And all the links to my social media, including Patreon, can be found in the description and my pinned comment. Here is the board of awesome for the epic people who already support the channel on on Patreon. They're all absolute heroes, and I love them all deeply and, of course, often. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and a pinned comment. And with that all said, I'm GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters. And it of course excels more so in areas that aren't incredibly open, so keep that in mind and don't go running across the fields of Panzerstorm on Conquest or something with it and expect to automatically do well. You need to stay to the more confined areas, whether it be Team Deathmatch, Conquest or anything else.